So, hello everyone. Today, my guest that joins me, I'm really excited because I've been nagging him to to join me on the show. So, thanks very much, Rhyno. How are you doing?
Great, great. Thank you for having me. And you really hadn't been nagging me, but we tried to set it up on Skype. But one, I'm not technically inclined, and yeah, so the Zoom works better for me, and so. But
No, it's brilliant
anyway,
to get you on. Obviously, it's a weird time for everyone at the moment with the lockdown measures that are in place. How are you finding it and coping with that? Because it must be difficult for you in regards to not being able to do your shows and things that you normally would.
correct. It's a difficult time for everybody around the world. It's just learning how to cope, and obviously, wrestling's a passion of mine, and not being able to go out and do your passion or be it's just it's difficult for that, and entertaining the fans and meeting the fans and all that stuff. And plus here in Michigan, the state shut down with all the other states. I think there's a few that aren't shut down because of the population, and it really hasn't hit over there. But for the most part, with the marina, I have a little marina here in Michigan, and that's shut down too. But we're starting to get into the season, so it really hasn't affected it too much. So we'll see where that goes in the next few weeks or few months.
Well, you just
But yeah,
mentioned there that wrestling's obviously a big passion of yours. I wanted to go back to the very beginning. Where did that passion actually come from? Where did you actually get your love of wrestling from?
well, I started watching when I was a kid, so probably around '86, and that's when the whole WWF, then it was called WWF, the big boom in wrestling, and it was mainstream, and Hulk Hogan and Hulkamaniac, and then Ultimate Warrior hit the scene and all that. So once I developed a passion for wrestling then, and then as I played sports as a kid, whether it was baseball, football. Then I got into wrestling because of pro wrestling. So I wrestled in high school, and then after my senior year, that was '93. The wrestling business started changing, and it wasn't necessarily the land of the giants as it was. You had guys like Bret Hart, which was a very big guy, 200, I think 35 pounds or 240 pounds. Shawn Michaels and other guys like that, they were, ahead of the game, and they were becoming champions. And it wasn't the, 6'6", 320 pounds, and that's the smallest guy on the roster. So I started growing and training, with weights as far as for bulking and stuff. And so I'm like, you know what, maybe I'll give it a go. So I found a school in Windsor, and I was able to train there, and then had my first match March 10th of 1995. So that the passion as a kid watching it turned into being able to partake in it.
And in regards to becoming kind of a household name, a lot of us remember you from your ECW time. Now, ECW has become one of the most talked about, celebrated, and legendary promotions of all time.
Mhm.
When you joined the promotion, because it's obviously a hardcore-based style of wrestling, did you have any kind of doubts about joining? Were you thinking I wanted to go to a more technical style, or was it something you just kind of accepted and was happy to be part of?
Oh, it was funny because when I first, you'd read about there's a like a convenience store, 7-Eleven. I think you guys have it over there in the UK. And I would always go there and look at the wrestling magazines. I'd drive up there, grab a pop or whatever, and thumb through all the wrestling magazines. And back in the '90s, there was a lot of wrestling magazines out. And it was funny because the first time you saw your name in there, they would give results for independent shows and stuff. You felt like you accomplished something big. And then I seen the stuff with ECW, and they'd have pictures, and they were getting a lot of press at that time.
Yeah.
And a lot of the press was, chair shots and blood and barbed wire. And I thought to myself, well, I'll never go there. If I have an opportunity, I don't want to go there. But that was never my goal. And then I was over in Germany wrestling for Otto Wanz, and Ulf Herman was telling me about it. And he's like, no, he goes, because I thought, from the time the first bell rang to the last bell, that's all it was, is blood and guts. And then Ulf was, over there, I think it was in '97 or '98. And he was telling me for the summer, and he goes, no, no, it's not like that. You'll have guys that wrestle matches like that. And so I started to look into it a little bit more, and I'm like, well, yeah, I'd love to use tables and chairs and stuff like that in my match, you know, but I don't want to do barbed wire or thumbtacks or none of that stuff. So I ended up looking into it a little bit more, and then hooked up with John Pee Wee Moore, the referee. And then I went in for a workout, a couple workouts here in Michigan, and you know, we'd work out before the shows, and then I'd watch the shows, and I'm like, wow, this is something I'd really love to be part of. And it was kind of funny, you know, not wanting to go there, you know, not even having that direct, and then, you know, and then becoming more familiar with the product, and you know, I thought I'd love to go there, you know, so, and be part of it.
And were you surprised with how legendary that the promotions become in regards to a lot of promotions over the years have closed down, but ECW is one of those that remains just so legendary. So were you surprised that the fans still hold it in such high regard?
No, because it was a moment in life. You know, we all look back at our lives. You know, whether it's relationships, whether it's work, whether it's things we enjoy, musicians, wrestling, and we all look back and we hold things dear. And you know, because it was a special moment in time, that it's unfortunate. You know, I don't see that moment in time ever happening again, and you can never duplicate it. It was just society. It was just wrestling going from such a clean cut gimmicky thing to you know, you'd have real life, you know, scenarios in there, you know, like when Sandman and Raven getting his girl, and Sandman's like, yeah, you can have my ex-wife, but then he brainwashed his kid, you know. And it's very difficult because, you know, people know what it's like to be in a household where there's only one parent. Parents are divorced. Next thing you know, you see your dad paying more favoritism to the other kid in his new relationship, you know, and that hurts you. But or the mother kind of brainwashes the kid to, you know, go against the dad. Unfortunately, stuff like that happens, you know. You know, so it's very hard on the dad. So here's things, you know, that in real life things could happen or people may have dealt with, and you know, you can emotionally get behind a guy like Sandman, and it was never done in wrestling. So I think that's the cool thing about it, and it had such a gritty. Um, the production was so gritty where it felt real, you know. So
Going when ECW actually closed its doors, you then signed to the WWE. Now, at the time, WWE was signing so much talent from ECW, WCW. It was kind of talent overload. So when you signed your contract, was there part of you that was worried that you might get pushed aside just on the sheer volume of the amount of people that they had signed? Did that ever
well,
cross your mind?
the first one, it was myself, Tajiri, and Justin Credible. We were the first three that signed with WWE. And then I think a couple months later after that, that's when they figured we'd do the invasion angle, after they had bought WCW. And then they started signing guys like Dreamer, RVD, and other guys like that. So I had already had, you know, my foot in the door. Plus I was with Edge and Christian, and I really didn't necessarily worry about getting shoved off to the side. I was just having fun and on all the shows, and you know, the talent roster isn't like what it is now. But yeah, there was a lot of guys, and it never really crossed my mind if I was going to get pushed to the side. So.
And the great thing about you guys who had come over from ECW, it opened the doors to a really solid hardcore division. And obviously, you know that yourself by being the hardcore champion. Was it nice to do the stuff that you were doing in ECW, but on a much bigger scale? Because it was kind of toned down a little bit, but it was still very entertaining, and it was new to the WWE.
Yeah. Oh, it was great because you know, there you could. It was like a candy box of toys you can play with. Like they would have stuff you could just go in there and, okay, I want this in my match, that in my match, you know. And back then they weren't really too concerned, because right now, you know, you have large sponsors and stuff like that, and you don't want to upset the sponsors, because that's what really pays the bills. And I could see that back then we didn't have to really deal with it. You know, they had large sponsors, but we didn't have that. The first concern on our mind wasn't that. So that's why I think that's why they pushed the envelope a little bit further than what they did, what they do now. So back then, and plus our agents for the match, you know, they're more or less messengers. Like, okay, well, you can't do that because, you know, we'll leave it for the main event. You know, even if the main event might not use it, but so moves or chairs or whatever. So, but you're like when I would work with Briscoe, he would just let me do whatever I wanted to do because I had proven myself. And it was hardcore was more my thing and not his, even though he was in control of like agenting a lot of those matches. So it was really nice because as a creative person, you can go in there and do whatever you wanted. But you know, there's some things you had to ask to make sure they weren't going to do it in other matches. But yeah, you could just go out there and do whatever you wanted. So it was really cool. So.
And I was going to say, for me personally, my as a fan, the years that you were in WWE were actually my favorite, and you had some good matches with people like Chris Jericho, who has now become this kind of legend of the business. He whether it's his promos that he's cutting or his ability to do what he does at AEW. So, what are your thoughts on Chris Jericho and what he's done? Kind of in the later years of his career, you know, what he's doing now in AEW. What are your thoughts on him?
You know, I was just, you know, I was in WC or WWE in, you know, for 3 years from 2016 to 2019. And, you know, Jericho was, you know, he would come over and do some shows here and there. And I remember we were in Japan. And just when you thought you learned as much as you possibly could from the guy, you learn more. It's like the guy is just incredible. And you know, we'd go out and we'd eat, you know, because he's really good friends with Edge and Christian. And, you know, before we started working together. And, you know, I just listened to him talk. You know, we'd eat after the show or we might meet up before and eat or whatever. And, you know, and just listening to him, you know, behind the scenes, promos, this and that. And, you know, and I was just on his podcast probably about 6 months ago. And we were talking before and during the podcast and stuff. And you can't help but learn from the guy about the business. And he is a legend. And, you know, he reinvents himself without totally overhauling his whole career, like the whole list thing and, you know, and like, you know, and some of the stuff he'll say, like the whole Babu thing. And, you know, and I think that was a slip of the tongue, but it got over and he ran with it. But there's so much stuff you can learn from the guy. And, you know, apparently he likes to drink, but, you know, after the shows and stuff, like a rock star. I've never actually witnessed it, but I've heard stories. So, but I don't know if he's taking the drink and spilling it off into the plant next year, or if he could give Ric Flair a run for his money. You know, Ric Flair in his prime. So, you know, Slater went out with him in Japan, and he goes like this. He goes, man, he goes, I thought I could hang. So, but anyways, yeah. So he's just a great guy, and he's able to entertain, and you know, and he's able to go out there and perform, and definitely a true legend. You know, definitely. So, and I'm happy to call him my friend. So I don't know if he'd call me his friend.
Well, I mean, like he's got the ability to say anything, and then it's
Yeah.
on a T-shirt, and then it's selling loads of merchandise. It's just such a skill to have.
Well, the cool thing about him and why he's very important for any company he wrestles for, he can either run the company or go out there and be in the main event, and he's willing to help out other guys as far as help elevate them, helping guys get over in their matches, you know, and the importance behind the scenes, you know, how to act, and you know, there's a lot of ability that he has to not only help or lead a company or a locker room, you know, but to lead a person into becoming the best performer they can possibly be. So man and woman.
And I mean, another person for me that I always remember some of your matches and different moments with is Chris Benoit. Now, it's a sensitive subject because I kind of feel he's one of the greatest wrestlers of all time, but I almost feel like I can't say his name in an interview. It's a kind of a tricky one. So what are your memories of wrestling Chris Benoit and the stories that you shared with him?
Yeah. You know, I remember him. Obviously, it's very tragic what had happened on all parts. And I just watched, I'm sure you guys get Vice over there.
Yeah, I've seen the documentary.
Yeah, and you know, I never really thought about his son. I knew his son, you know, David probably picked up, you know, well, not probably, but a lot of painful things. And I didn't know Nancy had a sister, so you know, it's stuff they had to deal with, you know. And I really, you know, I really felt after watching that documentary, my heart goes out for them, you know, tremendously. Um, but as a person, I mean, he was always a great guy. I think drugs and alcohol had a lot to do with it. Um, you know, and I believe he was religious, you know, because in the documentary I heard he left Bibles, you know, next to the bodies and
Yeah.
stuff. And you know, you know, it's one of those things where, you know, you always scratch your head and what ifs, you know. Um, and Chavo, you know, probably lives with that, you know, and it torments him. You know, what if he would have, you know, called him? What if he would have, you know? Um, so we can't really, you know, live on what ifs, but we can always just move forward. But I mean, with that being said, you know, the guy I knew, you know, he was always great. He was always caring. He'd always give the shirt off his back. You know, so he was always out there, you know, wanting to, you know, some of my best matches were with Chris. And then I was able to tag with him. And then we tagged at WrestleMania. And tagging with him, I'd work with Chavo and Eddie. And they would actually push me to go and call it out there, which made me a better person, you know, in the ring. And, you know, and a person, you know, behind the scenes, because you're able to, you know, just, you know, approach things with a calm head and learn how to deal with things. And then, you know, in your real life too, and just really figure out how to adjust to things as it, you know, comes at you.
Yeah.
I mean, not saying my mailman's arm dragging me, but you know, it was wrestling. You know, those tag matches, I was able to really take my my talent and move it forward. So, but
I mean,
yeah, it was.
going,
I'll never forget. I'll tell you one thing. He came up to me and he goes, you know, people think I'm so serious all the time because I don't laugh at jokes. He goes, sometimes the punchline, I don't get it for a second or two afterwards. He goes, not because I'm dumb. He goes, I just don't really understand jokes. He goes, but I don't want to laugh 2 or 3 seconds after the punchline because then I'll look dumb. I go, and this was in Pittsburgh at the Mellon Arena or something. It was the old arena. I go, why don't we just start off with knock knock jokes? And I had them rolling with the dumbest knock knock jokes. So it was, yeah, I'll never forget that. But
and I was going back to the documentary that we were just talking about. Another thing that I found kind of, which I didn't necessarily know, was how much people just adored Eddie Guerrero and what he did for a lot of people.
yeah,
What are your experiences with Eddie? Because you must have shared some moments during your time with Eddie.
yeah. You know, Eddie, great guy. You know, I was very proud of him because he really cleaned his act up, and it mentioned that in the documentary when he was released. I think it was in 2002, and then he worked. You know, he was only gone for a little bit. He cleaned up, and you know, he was clean for the rest of his life. You know, and he would always pray and stuff like that. I'd see him doing that off to the side, and you know, he he was awesome to work with. I'll tell you a story. You know, because some of us, you know, it was very obviously he had some demons, you know, whether it was drinking or whatever, you know, and he got past that. And I was in Cologne, Germany, and we're over there on tour, right? And I drank too much. I remember going to my room. I never blacked out or anything, but it seemed like it was like 15 minutes later they were knocking at the door, and I thought the guys were ribbing me, you know, and sent up the security guy, you know. I literally thought I was sleeping for 15 minutes. But I go, okay, I'll be down. I was going to go back to bed because we had a charter flight into the UK. So, anyways, I'm going to bed and I see daylight through the curtains. I'm like, oh, crap. And then I look on the TV. It had a little clock in the corner. And I seen the time. It was like 10:05. Nobody got their wake-up calls, right? So I'm still hammered drunk, right? So I'm throwing everything in, rinse off in the shower, we get to the town, and everybody's going to the gym. I was so sick. I'm like, I'm never gonna drink this much again. You know, just nauseous, not, you know, just uncomfortable and just hungover, worst hangover ever. So I get to the building. I can't eat catering, and I have Eddie Guerrero. And when Eddie and Chris, they always, when you got them in the ring, they like to go, right? And so, anyways, I looked at Eddie. I go, Eddie. So I told him the story I just told you. He goes, I go, and I think I wet the bed that night too. And he looked at me as if, oh, that's, you know, no big deal. I go, I think he might have said that. I go, what do you mean no big deal? He goes, wait until you crap in the bed. You get so wasted you crap in the bed, then come back and tell me your story. I go, wow. I go, now I feel like a lightweight. Not saying that he did or didn't do it, but he told me, wait till you take a crap in the bed, wake up, and, you know, just wrap your sheets, push it off, and go back to sleep. No, but I went out there, and we ended up going like 25 minutes, and that was the best thing that ever happened because I sweat out that hangover, you know, and the alcohol. But yeah, it was actually a really good match too. So yeah, that was one of the cool things about those guys. They really pushed you, and you became a better performer.
Now, obviously, a lot of your career and your success was in TNA, which had a lot of former WWE talent go over. So when you were approached to sign for TNA, were you excited about going to a new promotion and having the chance to maybe display skills that you hadn't in previous promotions?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Jeff Jarrett, never really worked with him. Scott Demore, the guy that trained me, there was two other trainers, Mick Doyle and Denny Cass. You know, so I was very you know, happy to go over there, and it was a smaller crew. I could go and do independent shows, get on the road, and still keep a busy schedule. So it was, you know, working with Dixie, and you know, it was a lot of fun, and it was nice because you'd go to do TV in one place all the time, and you know, it's nice to go to Florida every couple of weeks. So I'm not gonna lie.
And obviously, you had a great success in TNA, but I wanted to go back to your return to WWE in 2015 because 10 years had passed since you had left
Right.
And come back. So was it different going back this time? How did it feel when you actually returned to the WWE?
Well, you know, it was everybody, you know, was happy to see me, you know, the talent and everything, and they had watched me when they were kids, and you know, you had guys like Kane and Big Show that were still there, a few other guys, you know, but it was a different locker room. But it was a good locker room too. I've never been in a locker room where it was just like, man, I never want to go back. You know, whether it was an independent show or Impact or WWE. So it was one of those guys. It was one of those moments where I'm not a guy to stand up in the locker room, get on a chair, and you know, and give that Paul Heyman speech. You know, I'm that guy that'll go up to you and say, "Hey, I watched your match. These are some of the things I really like. You know, or maybe try this, this, and this." You know, but I'd always tell the talent, if I make a suggestion, don't feel like you have to do it. You know, because the worst thing you can do is give them some advice and they feel obligated to do that. You know, a person's really got to, you know, look at everything they have, you know, that's put in front of them and what will work for them and what's something that they would want to work for them too. You know, and that's the worst thing you could do is take someone's creativity away, because then they're just a puppet and you're not going to get the best out of them. So it was really cool because I was accepted right away in the locker room. You know, and I really didn't feel older, you know, because sometimes you're like, oh man, now I'm that old guy in the locker room. You felt like you had a lot to offer, you know, and help out that next generation, because I want to find the next Rock, the next Austin. And a lot of people have said, you know, you're my mentor. I tell you this and that, or I tell people, and, you know, that's nice to hear, you know, but that's not my main goal. My main goal is to see you become the best you can possibly be. in the ring and out of the ring too. And that's another important thing when you're a senior in wrestling. You got to keep these guys from making the mistakes you've made, you know.
Yeah.
So getting drunk at bars, remember there's a lot of cameras out there now. But you know, it's just because we live in a society where, you know, you get a drunk driving ticket, you know, that changes your whole life. And you know, nowadays you know, it wasn't cool then, not cool now, but you know, you don't want to make that mistake.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
With this Zoom, I've got, like they said, you get 40 minutes per meeting. So what I might have to do is send you a new link. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Just because I think it's my time's running out that I've got. So I'll send. So obviously a big part of your return to WWE was your tag team with Heath Slater. Now, when that was put to you, what were your initial thoughts? Because it was unexpected in a way. So when they put it to you, were you kind of like, okay, I'll run with this?
Yeah, no, well, they did a thing where he, you know, he needed a job and, you know, and this and that. And it just worked and fit. And he's just a funny guy. What you see is what you get. And there's a lot of times where you know, we, after they put us over for the titles, we you know, and he makes you laugh. I mean, you know, we started traveling together and rooming together, and he just makes you laugh. He's just a good down, like what you see is what you get. And if you don't want to laugh, do not travel with him because he will make you laugh. And it was cool because I have a lot of quirks to me, you know, and he was able to, you know, understand that, you know, not a lot of quirks, but I'm that guy that, you know, I keep the hotel room clean, you know, and he's the guy that, you know, he's not a messy person, but he's like, why are you doing that? It's like, just let me do it, you know, like I'll push in the chair that's over by the desk and I'll keep my stuff neat in the corner, and, you know, and it's just like, I think I just have to do something, you know, and like I'll make the bed if we're going to go to the gym. He's like, why are you making the bed? I'm like, why not? Because, you know, especially if we're going to stay there that night and we don't like, I don't like the room service coming in because it's really not necessary. You know, throw your towels under the sink and grab some new ones. You know, if you pick up after yourself, no need for them to come in, you know. So anyways, plus you don't have to worry about people stealing stuff. So, yeah, so he was just always like, he was cool with that. But there's some of the quirks I'd have, you know, he overlooked them, and, you know, he'd make fun of me sometimes. But for the most part, we were able to mesh really well. And sometimes I would look at him and I'd say, oh, man, I want to beat that person up. He's like, that kid will kick your butt. Just stuff like that. Yeah, so, yeah, he's a hell of a guy. So,
and you could see.
What's that?
I'd say your chemistry came across so well on screen, because you'd see, whether it's social media and stuff you'd put on Twitter and stuff, you just seemed to have, like you said, such a laugh, and it was, you could see a true friendship was blossoming every time you were working together. Yeah,
you know what was cute is the other day, I think his one daughter lost her tooth, and they go, who do you want to tell? They go, Uncle Rhyno. That's cool. And I just talked to him. Hopefully, you know, because he was released with a bunch of other men and women. Very unfortunate. You know, I talked to him and I'm like, hey, you ever thought about Impact Wrestling? Because, you know, it's a blast over there. AEW is a great company. I heard the locker room's great over there, the management and all that stuff. So, you know, I was telling him about the indies, you know, because he didn't do a lot of indies before he got signed. So, you know, I was telling him about that, and, you know, you know, he's in a great place. His wife's very supportive, his kids and all that stuff. But, you know, so hopefully we'll be able to tag up, because we haven't tagged in almost probably about a year. A little under a year. So definitely working with him is so much fun. And the cool thing about him is he works for the match, not himself. Yeah. So, and a lot of guys are in there working for the match, not themselves, and it puts a better product out for the fans.
And you were just obviously mentioning there, obviously last week, Shockwaves was everywhere with the release of talent from WWE. Right. Now, What are your thoughts on that? Because I can't remember a time it was done in a way it was, in the sense of there were so many names, and it was done
Yeah.
during this pandemic, which is a stressful time for people as it is. So, what were your thoughts on the way it was done and some of the names that were released?
Yeah. Well, you know, my heart goes out to everybody, whether you're a producer, whether whatever it is. You know, but we have to look at WWE as a whole. Um, you know, they have to do things that might not seem right in order to keep it going for future generations. Because my life would be totally different if I didn't have wrestling in it. Not just to work, but as a kid. When I was a kid, there was a lot of things, you know, as a kid, you go through different things and you need an outlet because sometimes you know you feel you don't feel comfortable talking to people. Maybe I was obsessive compulsive as a kid and I thought I was abnormal, but it's something, you know, that
Yeah,
kind of ties into the making the bed and straightening up the hotel room, you know. But wrestling was my outlet. You know, wrestling made everything okay. And what WWE needs to do is they need to realize that they have an obligation to keep going in order to put out a product for kids to lose themselves in, you know, and adults too. As adults, we need something, a release, and we need to lose ourselves, whether it's in a movie, whether it's in wrestling. And, you know, when we were kids, we watched it. And now that we have kids, we can take our kids to the shows and to autograph signings. And, you know, and when you have a product that's easier for people to access, whether it's just flip on the TV or DVR it, that's great. You know, so independent wrestling shows, there might be an independent wrestling show close by that you can still partake in wrestling, but you might not know it's there, and you can't just turn on the TV and it's there. So that's why companies like AEW or Impact or WWE is very important to have a TV product. And the tough business decisions WWE has to make now, it's just for the future, you know. So
okay.
so
And
it's understandable, you know.
I wanted to go back to obviously last year when you decided to leave WWE. Was there talks about them wanting to keep you? Was it your decision to
Yeah,
go?
yeah, yeah. No, they offered me more than double what I was making.
Wow.
Yeah, and the thing was is I was sitting at home a lot more, nothing because of attitude or abilities, you know. And I've always been like the fans, like I'm blessed, like, you know, people chant Rhino all the time, and you know, like it's like people love ECW and the stuff I've done, and what's cool is because you know, with the WWE network, like parents can bring their kids up to speed on my career. So it's like, oh, I used to watch them in ECW. So it's funny because I'd go to the first time I really realized the WWE network was great for the generations is because a 7-year-old kid came up to me with a parent, and I was you know, at the gimmick table, and they go, "Oh man, I loved your stuff with Sandman. We were watching all of that this past week," because they knew they were coming to the show. So, and I'm like, "Wow, this 7." I go, "How old are you?" 7. I'm like, "That is awesome," you know. So then it means more to them watching me at this independent show. And then when I went back to WWE, but um, I kind of forgot the question you had. I kind of ramble on. You know, so you know, it's very important. Um, I forget what your question was.
So I was saying about obviously if it was your decision to leave, but that's quite a shock to hear that.
So, but yeah, so my thing is I was sitting at home more because they had to rotate talent, and you know, and I started to become miserable, and that's the last thing a person wants to do is be in a situation where they're miserable. You know, so I left, not making, you know, I'm blessed to make a living, but I talked to Scott, you know, because he runs Impact. Scott Moore, the guy that trained me, he goes, "Hey, we'd love to have you. We don't have money. You can do independent shows and do all your other stuff. We've got a great locker room, you know. But if you can make money, whatever your decision is, you know, we'll you know, I'll be happy for you either way." So I just thought about it. I'm like, I can, you know, indie scene is very hot. You know, I loved working the indie scene before. I really enjoyed being with WWE. It wasn't like I disliked tagging with Slater. I liked everybody in the locker room. I had to make a decision. Do I go on the indie scene and work with Impact now? Or do I stay there, go on the road once a week to TVs, become miserable, hate my life, hate my job? And that's the last thing you want to do is hate, and plus I would take up money for someone else to have an opportunity. So that's the last thing I want to do is just sit there and collect the paycheck and not be able to go out there and perform. And that paycheck could could go to someone else that, could be the next Rock or Austin, so.
I mean, I've done these interviews.
What's that?
I've done these interviews with some wrestlers over the last couple of weeks, and a lot of them have been open and said, we're in this for the money. Wherever there was a big contract, we would go. But it seems to me that, you really just have a love and passion for wrestling. It's like you want to give something back now. You're wanting to give your skills and your experiences to up and coming talent. So for you, has it always been more about wrestling than just, like you said, a paycheck?
Well, it's always been about the business because I was never a big money guy, because people have to realize there's a lot of money now thrown around because of the big money sponsors. But the thing is after you pay taxes, there was really never a lot of money in Impact. But after you pay taxes, your road expenses and all that stuff, pay your mortgage, pay your car payment, if you have a wife or children, or pay child support at the end of the day. So, I mean, yeah, money's nice, in any profession you do. But in the long run, I always try to tell people it's not a sprint to the finish line. It's a marathon, and the main thing, and I'm not saying I haven't been blessed. There's somewhere out there on the internet says I'm worth $4 million. I hadn't even made $4 million in my wrestling career. So I'm trying to find where that $4 million is. So someone, I said something about, about money or something, and I'll never complain because, like I said, I'm very blessed. They took a screenshot of that, and I go, wow, well, wherever that is, please tell me because I'm still trying to look for it. But anyways, yeah, so it's never been about the money. Yeah, obviously, you want to be the best. You want to draw money. You want to do this. You want to do that. But it's all about, like, making a difference. Like, I remember working with James Storm in Impact. And we did a program, and this is right after he stopped tagging, before he started tagging with Beer Money. And he was part of America's Most Wanted. So, he hadn't had that angle to really get him to the next level, especially as a singles competitor. So we worked the angle, and I made suggestions to get him over and put him over and all that stuff. And I did the same thing Sandman did to me, when I was in ECW, because Sandman wanted to work with me. And he's like, we're going to get you over. So that lasted throughout my career. It's about getting over and getting other people over. And the same thing when I went to WWE, The Rock, Austin, all those guys would get people over. Like The Rock was putting me over in Detroit, which was cool. So the thing is I worked that program, and then several years after that, after I was done with Impact, I was doing some independence and with Ring of Honor. This is like 2011, 12. They put him over for the heavyweight title in TNA. And I text him, I go, hey man, congratulations. And he said, hey, I owe it all to you. And I'm like, well, that's nice to hear, or read on a text. He goes, yeah, you doing that angle with me really launched me into a singles career. And I go, your hard work and, your direction and being a cool person is what made them put that on you. I go, I enjoyed our angle, but, it's nice for you to say, but, you're the one that really put in the work. He's like, oh, you can say that, but I'm going to stick to what I text you. I owe it all to you. I go, okay, I'm not going to argue with you. Send me a paycheck. But like other guys, like Vic Joseph, he's an announcer for WWE. And, he asked me to sit down with him. And I didn't like the guy at first. And I'm open with this story. Because the first time I met him, he was working in baseball and making really good money. He went to school for announcing. He'd fly himself on his own dime to an independent promotion and all this stuff. So a couple buddies of mine, they go, hey, you got to meet this guy. He's really cool. So he came into this bar, and I stopped drinking at that point. and I haven't drank in over 10 years. But so I go, I'll go there and eat. And so he came across as a real dick. So like I remember, because he came from college, and I later found out he was waving his credit card because it was a bar restaurant where we went to. And, because usually if you have money or something, the bartenders will come over to you. So he ended up, he brought a girl he was dating. I'm like, what does this guy think? I'm like some broke down poor wrestler or something. I'm doing the indies and stuff. And my buddies are really cool. They're independent wrestlers, and they really put this guy over. I'm like, well, this guy's a jerk. So I go, and I'm thinking this to myself, I go, I'll buy his girlfriend, her food, so, and not to hit on her or anything, so we were talking and all that stuff. I mostly had a conversation with his girlfriend, then became wife, and I'm the godfather to their children. So anyways, I didn't see him for like a month or two. And it's weird how things happen. I always encourage people, go to independent shows. If you're not booked, go ask if you can help out, watch the show, and then leave. You'll learn something. So anyways, a show canceled on me, an independent show. So I talked to my buddy, and I go, hey, you mind if I tag along to this wrestling show? Call the promoter, and then I'll set up a gimmick table, right? I'm not going to make any money sitting at home. He goes, yeah. I go, cool, because there was no money in the budget. So I'm like, okay, it's only a couple days. I can't get a date. I'll be on the road. Might as well go make a couple bucks. And I've always been very fortunate with gimmick sales. So we get there, and all of a sudden, here comes Vic Joseph hobbling in. Like he got in a car accident. And I thought to myself, oh, this effing guy again, right? He's in a car accident. Long story short, he goes like this. He goes, hey, man. And he wasn't booked on the show. He seen that I was going to be there. So he's like, you know what? I'll go up there. I'll sit with him at the gimmick table, and I'll pick his brain. And he asked me if he could sit next to me. Now I'm going, oh, man, I've got to deal with this guy the whole night, right? So anyways, he started picking my brain, and I realized, I'm like, and normally I don't judge people right off the bat, but him I did. So long story short, he just started tagging along on all these shows. We would drive 9 hours one way, work a show, stay the night, drive back to Detroit. Like he would work his days off around going on the road. And then he would pick he'd pick my brain. He would just watch the shows. He'd ask me questions afterwards. I'd try to see if he could figure out the answer first. And then he met Dreamer. And then we went out for the first House of Hardcore shows. And he started calling that. I'll never forget, we were in Dreamer's kitchen. And he looked, and he looked at Vic. And Vic's always asking me, he's like, hey, man, how do I approach Dreamer to call his shows? I go, well, text him. And Dreamer wouldn't text back. I go, I'll text him. And then finally, we're standing in Dreamer's kitchen. It's 2 days before the show. He goes, hey, you want to call my show? He's like, I'd love to, right? So he already made notes and all that stuff. But the point is you got to help other people out. And then, but at the end of the day, they're the ones that have to make the calls and stuff like that. So,
yeah. That's a funny story, though. You've got so many stories that you've shared today that I think everyone who's listening to this is just going to love, like the Eddie story and talking about Vic there. It's really cool and you come across as so gracious as well. And I think that's a really nice thing.
Yeah, I try, so.
And I remember when I first met you, it was in a place called Falmouth in Cornwall in the UK. And I had a chance to Falmouth in the UK.
Okay. That's the town.
Yeah, and this was about 4 years ago, and they said that we could interview you, and you were backstage, and you pranked us because me and my friend David were interviewing you. You sat there, and you did not look. You looked pissed, and we thought, oh, we've done something wrong. And we went, hi, I'm Lewis, I'm David. You went, yeah, sit down. We thought, oh God, this is a disaster. And we started going through the questions, and we were.
Was it for an independent show?
Yeah.
Yeah. Was it upstairs?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
We were shaking, and then I think it was about the third question. You turned around and said, "I was just pulling your leg," and we both just breathed the biggest sigh of relief because we had thought that we had pissed off Rhyno, basically. Right.
Well, see, I like doing that because you make someone really uncomfortable. Because a lot of times going into an interview, sometimes people are uncomfortable, right? Because they're nervous, they don't want to, and the easiest way to get them to relax is make them feel really uncomfortable. And then when you tell them you're just messing with them, then they really take that deep breath and relax, like, wow, okay, he's messing with me. He's a cool guy. And it, for some reason, it just gets people to relax a little bit more. So yeah. Yeah, and plus I like messing with people too.
But I mean, I tried the skill with people that I interviewed over the years. It didn't work. They just walked out the room and there was never an interview. So I don't think I'm as good as you.
Right, right. No, yeah, it's one of those things where it's like you got to make people feel comfortable, and that way they can do the best interview possible. If they're not, their mind's gonna be in other places than asking the good questions. So when you make someone feel comfortable, that's when they can work at their best ability. Even in the ring, we're told if you're nervous, which I'm nervous every time I go out there. And I think it was Chief Jay Strongbow told Stephanie McMahon this, and Stephanie had told me this when we were doing the invasion angle, and we're waiting to do a promo, and we're standing there, we're waiting for the lighting guys, sound guys are there and all that stuff. And I'll never forget, she told me, she goes, Chief Jay Strongbow told her, she was probably a kid, once you lose your nerves, you lose your love for it. So once you lose your nerve, going out there, so it's one of those things where, obviously you're going to be a little nervous. When you get in the ring, take a deep breath, relax, and then just, go after it. Same thing with interviews or, stuff like that. You got to get the person to relax because they perform, on a better level. So.
Well, I had some gas and air before talking to you today, just in case it was going to happen again. I've got to say, I follow you on Facebook and social media, and we know that wrestling's a massive passion of yours, but so is politics. And it's something that you love. So where did your love of politics come from, and when did you realize that you could actually make a difference with it?
Well, I think everything in life is trying to make a difference in a positive way, in anybody's life, whether it's be a good neighbor to your, or, be, do stuff in your community, be a leader in your community, whatever it may be. When I was a kid, we'd always watch the news, right? My dad would watch the news at the end of the day. And I was just telling this girl the other day, because she's 39 and she don't remember, but in America, I think it was midnight, TV would go off the air because we never had cable, right? So so if you didn't have cable, and I don't know if cable would go off the air, but yeah, at midnight, I mean, we were well in bed, but sometimes we'd stay up late, right? TV, and this was early 80s, but yeah, it would play the national anthem and then it was done, So I was just talking about this the other day, but my daddy would always watch, the news. And so I'd always listen to, like the president, back then it was Reagan, or like if there was issues, that was going on. I really didn't know the issues. So I kind of kept my ear to the TV because that's all, whatever your parents watched, that's what you watched, right? Yeah. So there was no ands or buts about it. Good thing we got them into wrestling. So, I really didn't, I followed it a little bit and I learned about, how it works in school, to the most. I really wasn't a big, a really big fan of homework or anything like that, what kid is. So, I just paid attention somewhat in school, but after I got out of school, I think my real passion for politics started when I would sit down and talk with JBL. And, he would talk to me about like different things, and if this happens, that happens, and then this and that, and then I started really, that was in the early 2000s, then I really started looking into it throughout then, and then a couple buddies of mine, they're into politics locally and on a state level, and it's like, I love going to the council meetings and stuff, and it's pretty interesting, and it's easy for me to follow, but for some reason I always liked contracts. Like when wrestling, like whether it was ECW or WWE, obviously I'd have a lawyer look over it, and my taxes, my accountant. I'm always, for some reason, it interests me, and it's the detail, in the writing and stuff, and how it would bounce around in contracts, and I'd have a lot of questions, and then I'd sit at home and I'd look through the stuff, so that always interests me. So if that didn't interest you, you wouldn't want to get into, politics, because there's a lot of paperwork and stuff like that too, but a lot of things involved. And even going to the council meetings, they pass out sheets so you can follow along and all that stuff. But you know, it's just one of the things. Not only does that interest me, but making a difference in someone's life interests me too. You know, because at the end of the day, you know, with wrestling, whether, you know, if you have an interaction with someone and they go away feeling good about themselves, you know, you've made a positive influence, you know, in their life for a short period. And if you can do that, you know, in your community, even better. So.
And whoever your opponent is in politics, I guess you can just kind of gore them off the stage. Sorts that out.
We're going through the Titantron, you know. But one of the things I really, you know, I'm running for trustee here in Monroe Township. And, you know, one of the things I learned, you know, if you're not running for office, help someone out that is. You know, because especially if you're knocking on doors in your community, that's where you really learn. You know, and just talking to people. You know, they say you don't want to go over 2 minutes because you want to try to hit as many houses and meet as many people. But you really learn, you know, and it opens your eyes. And you have to approach things. You know, I approach things in life with an open mind and an open attitude because you learn. You know, but it's just two things I learned about Dearborn when I lived in Dearborn. A lot of steps, you know, on porches. And there's a lot of red doors and a lot of dogs. So I'd never done this before, but I almost fell up steps. And then a dog came running and jumped on the door and it wasn't latched, so it popped open. But he stopped, thank God. Yeah, and then there was a lot of fun stuff that happened, you know, on the doors, and you gotta, you know, some stories. But this one girl answered the door naked, but she was behind the door, and I'm like, all my buddies that are politicians are like, you'll probably see, you'll probably catch a couple women naked, you know, opening the door. A buddy of mine, he's a mayor, and he was knocking on doors, and the little kid popped the door open before the mom could put the robe on, right? So I'm like, well, that's good. I'm you know, getting excited about going knocking on doors. What I seen were a bunch of middle-aged men, and they didn't have a shirt on, you know, and they worked the graveyard shift, the midnight shift, and they're opening up the door. It's like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. They're scratching their beer belly, going, "I was waiting for you to come by my house. I've been meaning to talk to you." I'm like, you could have put a shirt on. You know, but no, it was a lot of fun, and you get to know your neighbors in your community and, you know, their concerns. So that it's fun. So definitely, I encourage people to help, you know, people out, especially in, you know, if they're running in your community. So, but yeah, it was a lot of fun. I knocked on 14,000 doors. So
wow.
Yeah, it was a lot, you know. So I mean, one day I hit 300 doors. That was my goal, 302 doors. I started pretty early in the morning, and then I went all the way until probably about 9 o'clock at night. So, but yeah, it was definitely, you know, the good thing about Dearborn, you know, the houses are right next to each other, so you could cover a lot of ground. So.
Oh wow! And I know boats as well. Another thing I was looking at, boats is a huge passion of yours as well.
Yeah.
Do you have a business to do with boats?
Yeah, I have a marina.
Wow.
One of the reasons I ended up in Monroe. Monroe is a very historic city in Michigan, and I think it's the third largest city. But no, it might be, or it might be the third largest county. But anyways, and I love history. And there was a marina for sale, a little marina, and it had a house. So, you know, I'm thinking, you know what, I might as well go after this, because I sold my house, and then I stayed on my boat for one summer. And then everybody, it's funny because everybody's like, what are you going to do in the wintertime? It's like, ask me in September. Let me enjoy this, because I'd go on the road and work, and then you come home for a couple days, and I just stay on the boat, right? It was really nice. And I ended up seeing this opportunity, and, you know, been working at it, and a lot of work, a decent amount of money, but it's something that I have fun with. And boating on the Great Lakes, yeah, it's one of those things where wintertime comes around, you put the boat away, and then mid-January, early February, you start to get excited about boating season. So if it was a year-long thing, like down in Florida, you might lose that passion because it's
Yeah.
there all the time. You can do it all the time. So, but yeah, I just love I love boating, and I seen this as a good opportunity, and I needed a house. So, and I always loved Monroe. So.
I've got to say, to get the opportunity today to not only just interview you, but hear the incredible stories that you've shared with us, has been a dream, because I am a huge fan, and you come across as just the nicest, most genuine person that wants to give a lot back. You know, you've experienced so much, and you're now wanting to share that with other people. So thank you so much for giving us your time today.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. And you know, what's funny is with boaters, I thought that. I was just thinking about this the other day. You know, you rent your docks out, and some people are very needy, and some people you just, you know, they'll give you the payment, and then you don't hear from them. You'll see them, you'll wave to them, but some people are very needy, and I'm thinking, man, this is a lot like the wrestling business. The boys are very needy, and you know. But yeah, it's really funny. This guy's always hitting me up. He's like, hey, can you do this to my dock? Can you do that? It's like the docks are cement and steel. Do whatever you want with them. Leave me alone. And he rented one of the smaller docks too, so they're not that expensive. It's like, come on. Hey, how about you do it? You know, like, just leave me alone. I've got a lot of TV to watch because this whole Corona thing. I can't go anywhere, so I want to watch TV.
No, honestly, thank you. Thanks for sharing your stories. It's been so much fun and a lot of laughter, which has been brilliant today. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. You guys have a great day and stay safe over there. Okay.
That's brilliant. Thank you. There, I've got that all recorded. Thank